Today we are going to deal with the paper Contemporary Malayalam Literature in English Translation. This is an elective paper you have to study in semester 3. This paper includes detailed as well as non-detailed study. In detailed study you have two modules, poetry and drama. In the module poetry you have 6 detailed poems, and in drama you have 1 detailed play. In non-detailed study, you have to learn 4 modules, namely poetry, fiction and short fiction, drama and prose. In the module poetry, you have a poem. In fiction and short fiction, you have to learn 4 novels and 4 short stories. In the module drama, you have 2 plays, and in the module prose, you have 2 essays. So we'll start off with detailed poetry. In this lecture, I shall discuss 3 detailed poems. The first one is Kumara Pillai's Ethra Yadrischikam. I'll first give an introduction to Kumara Pillai, then I'll move on to the summary and critical analysis of the poem. Kumara Pillai is a popular poet, essayist, lyricist and activist. He has written around 20 books. Alongside Kumari, Ayyappa Paniker, Kakkad, Vishnunarayan Nambudiri, Akkitham, he gave a fresh momentum to Malayalam poetry in the 1960s. Some of his most popular collections include Aralippookal, Marubhumiyude Kinavugal, Ormayude Sugandham and Saptaswaram. He won the Odakural Award in 1984 for his work Saptaswaram. He also won the Kerala Sahitya Academy Award in 1985. He had a unique style of writing which made him different from his other contemporaries. He followed the footsteps of the early Malayalam legends like Ezhuthachan, Kunjan Nambiyar and Edappalli Raghavan Pilla. His poems are known for the emotions and they are set in natural backgrounds. He transfers his thoughts, emotions and observations into his poems. Now we shall discuss the poem Ethra Yadrischikam. It is a poem which muses on the theme of certain coincidences. Life is a mystery and it is unpredictable. Life itself can be defined as an amazing concurrence of events or circumstances without any ostensible connection. This poem is subjective in nature as the poet is writing about his own experiences. He was employed at Thiruvananthapuram and in every weekend he used to travel to Alappuzha, the place where his wife was employed. He always waited for the bus at the stop near Statue Junction, and the poet felt that the statue of Madhava Rao is a mute witness to his life's journey. The poem is in the form of a recollection. He feels quite astonished at the turn of events in his life. He was born in Vennimala, Kottayam, educated at SB College Changanasheri, and later he got employed as a clerk in Bombay. And after some time he returned to Kerala to work in the Kerala Secretariat and later became the professor of English at University College Thiruvananthapuram. His wife Leela was also a professor at St. Joseph's College for Women, Alappuzha. In this poem, he once again looks at all these events with a touch of nostalgia. The poet commences the poem by thinking of the term Yadrischikam or coincidence. It is the weekend and the poet is desperate to catch the bus to Alappuzha so that he can meet his wife. The thought of meeting his wife evokes tenderness in his heart. In the second part, he feels that the statue of Madhava Rao is smiling at him, seeing all his nervousness. In fact, he has a question for the poet which takes him to the past. The poet thinks of his identity 3 decades ago. He considers life as a journey and he feels that the time has moved so quickly. For him, everything is sheer coincidence. In the next part of the poem, the poet thinks of his birth, which is again according to him as Yadrischikam. He says that it is nothing but coincidence to be born as the son of Gopala Pillai and Parvati Amma, and that too with the birth star of Pooradam in the evening during the Onam days. The poet narrates the glory of the childhood days, the stories and dreams of those times. He then describes his next stage, that of a youngster who marries a girl, and thus his life moves to another phase. Once again, he says that everything is coincidence, including concepts like birth, death, identity, different roles, and human relationships. The poem concludes by thinking about the coming days, and the poet repeats that everything is once again Yadrischikam. The phrase Ethra Yadrischikam is repeated often in the poem, and the reader gets reminded of the refrain nevermore in the poem The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. The poem Ethra Yadrischikam represents man's journey through different stages of his life. It is philosophical and at the same time simple in style. The poet considers himself as the subject. Thus, the poem turns out to be autobiographical but leaves ample thoughts regarding humanity. The second poem I shall discuss in this lecture is Fever or Jus Arum by N. Kakkad. Narayan Nambudiri Kakkad, popularly known as N. Kakkad, is a renowned Malayalam poet, Sanskrit scholar, playwright and broadcaster. He started his career as a school teacher but later joined the All India Radio as scriptwriter. Critics regard N. Kakkad as the pioneer of avant-garde poetry in Malayalam. His earlier poems are romantic in nature, but the later ones show a radical shift in his style as he focused more on the complexities of the human psyche. His popular collections include Shalabagidam, Padalathinte Mulakkam, Vajrakundalam, Sabalami Yatra, Nanni Thiruvoname Nanni, 1963, Pagalarudhikku Munbu, Nadan Chindugal, Shishyanaya Guru. He has also won numerous honours like the Kerala Sahitya Academy Award and Vayalar Award in 1986 for his collection Sabalami Yatra. He was also awarded the Ashan Prize, the Odakudal Award and the Cherugad Award. N. Kakkad started writing poetry at an early age. He experimented with new forms and ideas. He came to be regarded as one who had led Malayalam poetry forward in the last century. He penned his poems at a time when Kerala was undergoing social and political changes whose effects are still being felt. He was sensitive to the changes occurring around him. The weakening of the rural ethos and the rise of the hellish city disturbed him. He showed preference for rural life, but he does not delude himself into imagining that the village is an idyllic place filled with goodness. He often problematized his own past and formed a web of ideas around it. He employed fresh images, new metaphors, and archetypes in an attempt to articulate the new reality. Regarded as one of the founders of modernist movement in Kerala, he will always be remembered for his creative sensibility, richness of vocabulary, and skill in metrical composition. N. Kakkad's Fever, originally titled Jus Arum, is a short composition which describes the psyche of a man suffering from a disease. The poem is autobiographical in nature and it is written in a surreal manner. Early in the 1980s, Kakkad knew that his life was drawing to an end. He was severely afflicted with cancer and he was passing through a period of acute trauma. Yet the man who suffered kept alive the artist who created. With death's claws at his throat, he composed a few poems wrung from the personal experience of agony. Written in a lucid style, these are contemplations on the passage of time and the mortality of man. He made no attempt in downplaying the grave truth of death by speaking spiritual consolations. The speaker faces the fact of life and death bravely and in a peaceful manner. What is most striking about these visionary poems is that they are relatively free from genre conventions. Fever is a personal poem in which the poet expresses the anguish of his body and mind. Now that we have discussed the poet and a background to the poem, we will now move on to the poem itself. As I have already mentioned, Fever is a personal poem in which the poet is afflicted with fever. The opening line itself presents the condition of the man as he feels his head heavy with extreme pain. According to the poet, it is like a ground which feels extremely tired after a grand fair. The thought suddenly turns surreal as he feels everything like the deep song of a dancing flame or the broken beat of a fading shade. The poet perfectly understands that he is into the last phase of his life and a return is impossible. He says that he could even feel the sharp smell of the blue sky, which is again an image of the doom. The poem employs the literary device imagery, which creates a set of mental images. These images continue in the next part of the poem also. The poet understands that the days, or rather time, cannot pass easily, as it creates a real strain on his body. For him, every second is painful. He says, "A dusk and a dawn crawling with broken bones." Here he is saying that irrespective of time, whether it's day or night, he feels extreme pain and trouble in his body. His body feels like a broken bone. The images like the copper of a melting lotus, the flame of burning gold, and the shimmer of the bird's song once again gives the poet a feeling of a new dawn. Here the poet remains a bit optimistic, though he fully comprehends the reality of the situation. He says that he could feel a resonance of the primal sound along with the rising sun, just to remind him about the life on earth, which is purely transient in nature. The poem portrays the poet's experience of illness and the expectation of death. The translator of the poem, Prema Jayakumar, writes in her note, "Death has been faced with courage, heroism, even with indifference. But it is unique to find a person who greets death with a kind of half-amused and contemptuous understanding, as though death was a foolish friend for whom one yet had some affection." Kakkad himself states, I quote, "The realization that I was in the grip of a fatal disease upset me for some time. I felt that a few steps would take me to a gaping black void which was clearly visible before me. Then slowly that troubled state of mind changed, and I was able to visualize what was only a natural end, without fear or anxiety. Slowly it became a destination to be reached." The poem presents the reflection of a disturbed mind, but confident enough to face the inevitable. It is a metaphor for the journey of life, along with the physical and mental conditions of the poet. Now I shall discuss the third and final poem of this lecture, which is Ayyappa Paniker's The Village. First I will give an introduction to Ayyappa Paniker, then we will discuss the background of the poem, and then we will move on to the poem itself. Dr. Ayyappa Paniker was an influential Malayalam poet, literary critic, an academic and a scholar in modern and postmodern literary theories as well as ancient Indian aesthetics and literary traditions. He was born in 1930 at Kavalam village of Kuttanadu in Kerala. His father was Narayan Nambudiri and mother Meenakshi Amma. His academic qualifications include BA Honours from the University of Travancore, Master's degree from the University of Kerala, and PhD from Indiana University. He served as a professor at CMS College Kottayam, University College Thiruvananthapuram, and at the Institute of English, University of Kerala. He was professor and head of the department, Institute of English, from 1980 till his retirement in 1990. He began writing poems during his high school days. He published articles on poetic geniuses like P.B. Shelley, T.S. Eliot, and many others. These were published in the Malayalam weekly Kaumudi and Democrat in the 1950s. Initially, he was to a great extent influenced by Changambuzha. Later, he moved to modern poetry in which he set a style of his own. Coming to his contributions to Malayalam poetry, his intervention in the evolution of Malayalam poetry in the second half of the 20th century has been crucial. He introduced modernist sensibility to Malayalam in the 1960s, and after a couple of decades, he called attention to the inadequacies of modernism and argued for a new enrichment of the poetic sensibility. He was also a competent translator who gave a new direction to the course of Malayalam poetry by translating a number of European, African, and Latin American poems into Malayalam. He has collected his poems in the 4-volume title Ayyappa Panikerde Kritigal. He has also published a 3-volume collection of essays under the title Ayyappa Panikerde Lekhanangal. I Can't Help Blossoming is an anthology of his poems in English translation. He has translated a number of Indian and non-Indian writers into English. These include Charles Baudelaire, T.S. Eliot, Pablo Neruda, Vladimir Mayakovsky, Bertolt Brecht and Raja Rao. Cuban കവിതകൾ, മയക്കോവ്സ്കിയുടെ കവിതകൾ and Ayyappa Paniker's വിവർത്തനങ്ങൾ contain some of his translations. He has also published a number of works in English including Indian narratology and was the recipient of several prestigious national awards such as the Padma Shri, the Saraswati Samman and the Sahitya Academy Award. Now we shall discuss the poem The Village. It is a short poem of 19 lines that is filled with picturesque and naturalistic images of a rural village. The beautiful rustic images of nature in a village landscape like the canoe, the cloudy sky, the rain, the wet earth are presented lightly with a tinge of nostalgia. It is also a reminder of the changing scenery of the countryside to cities and towns with skyscrapers and industries. The poet requests us to memorize the delightful images nature provides for its residents and try to preserve them so that the coming generation could enjoy the aesthetic beauty of it. The poem is structured in the form of a conversation between the poet and a companion. The poet begins the poem by remembering an event that happened in the past. In the recent past, the poet's companion took the poet to his village. The companion told the poet that it was his village, but the poet sharply replied that it was his village. The companion, furious by the poet's reply, entered a canoe. The poet became an oar and took him away to a distant place. The companion transformed himself into a cloud and flew away to the sky. The poet became lightning and tinkled his companion. The companion hit the ground, scattering his raindrops. The poet became the wetness in the ground. They played games together. These beautiful images they created became artworks in the companion's reading room. The poet asks his companion to keep these images in his memory and to contemplate on them when he goes to his village. He asks his companion to remember the image of a river, its banks, and the people who lived in this village. At the end of the poem, the poet requests his companion to take these beautiful images to those villages where such scenic images are lacking. The poem is replete with ordinary and naturalistic images of a village space. They evoke a feeling of nostalgia in the mind of the readers. In this fast-growing world of progress and industrialization, the poet is requesting the readers to preserve the rural images in the artistic world, so that the coming generation may see the wonders of this beautiful and pleasing world. So we discussed 3 poems today: Kumara Pillai's Ethra Yadrischikam, Kakkad's Fever, and Ayyappa Paniker's The Village. These 3 poems are really short and simple, and we can expect some questions from these 3 poems. The first poem, Kumara Pillai's Ethra Yadrischikam, was about a man's journey through the different stages of his life and how coincidences play a crucial role. So we discussed the theme of the poem, the autobiographical elements present in the poem, and the significance of the refrain Ethra Yadrischikam. You will be asked a question to attempt a critical appreciation of the poem Ethra Yadrischikam. The second poem, Kakkad's Fever, is a personal poem in which the poet is afflicted with fever. It is a surreal experience in which the poet expresses the anguish of his mind and body. It is a reflection of a disturbed mind who is confident enough to face the inevitable. From this poem, we can expect questions like Fever is an autobiographical poem, the theme of death in the poem Fever, and also you can be asked to comment on the use of imagery in the poem Fever. The final poem, Ayyappa Paniker's The Village, presents a picturesque and naturalistic image of a rural village. The poet asks us to memorize the delightful image nature provides us because there is a changing scenery from the countryside to the cities. The poet asks the readers to preserve the rural images in the artistic world so that the coming generation may see the wonders of this pleasing world. From the poem The Village, you can expect questions like depiction of nature, comment on the use of images, and the structure of the poem The Village. You can also expect an essay, attempt a critical appreciation of the poem The Village. Thank you.